Hello everyone, I would like to welcome you to Atala Dwipa, a channel dedicated to exploring the ancient world. In this episode, we will be looking at a lost landscape our ancestors called home, an area now submerged below the Arabian Sea, a landscape dubbed the Gulf Oasis. My personal journey into this lost world started about a year ago when I came across a report written by Dr. Jeffrey Rose, an eminent archaeologist, who is interested in researching human origins. In 2010, Dr. Rose published a paper entitled New Light on Human Prehistory in the Arabio-Persian Gulf Oasis, and in it he made a bold statement that could rewrite history. What Dr. Rose stated in his paper is that beneath the Persian Gulf, around the islands of Tum, is to be found ground zero to the agricultural and urban revolutions of human history. Dr. Rose even went so far as to illustrate where these human occupation zones existed in an image that was part of his published paper. The reason Dr. Rose made such a statement is because of the overwhelming archaeological evidence that has been conducted around Qatar and other regions around Oman, of which Dr. Rose has been a part of in the last few decades. The uncovering of concrete evidence that humans were occupying Qatar as far back as 25,000 years ago started in the 1950s with a Danish team. This research was continued with new findings from British and French expeditions in the 1970s and 1980s respectively. Over this period of time, approximately 200 archaeological sites had been discovered, with the most extensive being the coastal areas of Qatar. This physical evidence shows that humans could have easily occupied the rest of this geographical region when the ocean had not covered it. The astonishing thing is that Dr. Rose is not alone in the world of East Asian archaeology when it comes to making a claim of an earlier culture existing below the waters of the Persian Gulf. Another archaeologist, Dr. Teresa Howard Carter, a distinguished scholar of the ancient Near East, said in a 1981 paper titled The Tangible Evidence for the Earliest Dilmun that the Gulf was an entirely dry basin about 15,000 BC, that the Tigris and the Euphrates carved their course separately and together to the Straits of Hormuz, where they emptied directly into the Gulf of Oman. In her paper, Dr. Teresa Howard Carter states that it is more than likely that the original Gulf Oasis inhabitants lived along the banks of the lower or extended Shatt al-Arab, indicated by the white circle in this image. She concluded that the pre-Sumerian cultures had more than ample time to be born and flourish in this ravine setting, encouraged by the agricultural potential and the blessings of a temperate climate. With so much archaeological evidence of early human occupation of Qatar and Oman, and the fact that several scholars arrived at the same conclusion on the location of an earlier thriving culture existing below the waters of the Persian Gulf, intrigued me. So I went looking, trying to find out what the Persian seafloor actually looks like. To my dismay, this is all I found. These maps are of such poor quality that they were incapable of showing me what this lost world looked like, at least not to any degree of detail. No one, to the best of my knowledge, has actually created a highly detailed map of the Persian Gulf seafloor. I was stuck. So imagine my joy when I stumbled upon a set of tools I could use in Google Earth that would allow me to map out the bathymetric lines of the Persian Gulf. I was happy it could be done, and so spent the next year mapping out the bottom of the Persian Gulf to within 2-meter intervals, of which the result of this exercise can be seen in this picture. Having revealed the data Google Earth provided, I was now able to see the floor as it once was 70,000 years ago in great detail. If interested in watching how I created this map, please look at a previous video I have created titled How I Revealed the Lost World of the Gulf Oasis. But being an artist, I was not happy with just lines on Google Earth. So, I transferred the data I had collected from Google Earth and put it into Photoshop. Using bits and pieces of satellite images, I was able to create an artistic representation of the topography of the Gulf Oasis. Doing this allowed me to remove the ocean in this part of the world and gaze upon a lost world for the first time. This is the Gulf Oasis, an area that has been said to have housed the beginning of agriculture and human urbanization. When we look at this detailed map that I have created, it seems apparent that Dr. Jeffrey Rose was correct when he tells us, given the extent of the exposed land within the Gulf Basin, the abundance of food, water, lithic raw material, and its conscripted geographic position, this sizable inland depression formed one of the most important oases in the ancient world. Now that a very detailed representation of what the Gulf Oasis looked like 11,000 years ago, let's take a closer look, shall we, at the area Dr. Jeffrey Rose and Teresa Howard Carter propose as the location where our ancestors had developed the first proto-city. When studying this area as I have, there are several features to become aware of, the first of which is the multitude of hills that existed in this area. the tops of which have become the Lesser and Greater Tum Islands, as well as the Aboomsa, Siri, and Fail Mood Islands. Another feature that sort of jumps out is the large freshwater lake that existed in this area. It was 150 miles in length and 20 miles in width, a great lake that was supplied by the Euphrates and the Tigris rivers. What was interesting when mapping out the depth of the lake was to find out that the easternmost part of this great lake was much shallower than the rest of the lake. It was an average of 2 to 3 meters deep, which would have produced a large wetland. As with any marsh or wetland today, they are home to many species of fish, birds, and other animals, and are essential for breeding, nesting, and feeding the needs of a wide array of plant and animal life. A third feature I became aware of when creating this map was a feature directly beside this wetland, a land divide, a strip of land that separated this great lake with another smaller yet deeper lake as seen here in this illustration. It is my belief that this land bridge played a significant role in regards to migrating herds of elephants, aurochs, and other large game that occupied this region of the world. This is because there is no other way to get from the northern part of this oasis to the southern parts of this oasis without having to travel the distance around the lake. This land bridge would have allowed large herds of animals to migrate across this great lake, making their journey much shorter and allowing them to quench their thirst at the same time. The last feature I would like to draw your attention to is the tide island that is attached to this land divide, a tide island that was surrounded by the smaller second lake east of the Great Lake. This island was approximately 20 miles in length and 10 miles in width. It rose approximately 20 meters above the smaller, deeper lake that surrounded it, and near the center of the island was a small round outcrop that rose another 20 meters. The fact that these three significant features are together made it hard not to see the advantage of this specific location over any other location within this proposed occupation zone. Though complete speculation on my part, I believe that the top of the hill next to the 20-meter vertical outcrop in the center of the tide island would have been the most idyllic location to establish the first proto-civilization. When Dr. Rose and Dr. Teresa Howard Carter described the lower portion of the Gulf Oasis giving birth to the human agricultural and urbanization revolutions in human history, I believe this round hill at the center of this tide island is the best location for those revolutions to have occurred. I believe this due to the close proximity of what would have been a large source of food in which to hunt and gather, and the fact that it is a large flat space that would have allowed a proto-city to spread out into, not to mention high enough in elevation to be unaffected by seasonal floods, something the banks of the eastern part of the Great Lake would have been prone to. Welcome to where I believe Ground Zero is located, where it all began.